The river flowed silently under the cloak of the night, its inky waters concealing an unspeakable horror. An unsuspecting man walking his dog by the river's edge stumbled upon something that should have been remained hidden in its depths. As his eyes widened in disbelief, a guttural scream tore through the stillness of the night, echoing off the trees and disturbing the tranquility of the village. Suddenly, like gruesome apparitions emerging from the river's abyss, the lifeless bodies of men began to surface, carried by the unforgiving current. Their pale, bloated faces stared lifelessly into the void, their cold, unseeing eyes bearing witness to the horrors they had endured. But the tale of terror began days earlier when a group of friends, George, Alex, and Matt, successful businessmen, had gathered at a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the village. Their pockets were heavy with the spoils of a lucrative deal, a new construction project that promised to bring them even greater wealth. Amid the flickering candlelight, they reveled in the lively atmosphere, their laughter and clinking glasses a testament to their success. With each drink, their voices and laughter grew louder, and their inhibitions faded away like smoke in the night. As the hours passed and the night deepened, the group of friends fueled by alcohol and arrogance found themselves entangled in a web of lust and desire. The women who had also sought refuge in the dimly lit establishment were the objects of their lustful pursuits. These men, too drunk to care about decency or empathy, were harsh and demanding in their pursuit of pleasure, treating the women with little regard for their feelings or dignity. The men's arrogance knew no bounds, and they flaunted their wealth with arrogance, offering to pay for the women's companionship, their voices dripping with condescension. It was at this juncture that Suyu, their friend, sat with them. Her radiant smile and ethereal beauty caught their attention, and her sudden appearance breathed an uncanny life into the room, dispelling the tension that had lingered in the air. George, ensnared by Suyu's enchanting allure, found himself irresistibly drawn to her. Her beauty was unparalleled, a vision of perfection that defied belief. In his eyes, she was the epitome of desirability, an unattainable dream come to life. The group of friends, now accompanied by their chosen women, left the bar and made their way to the hotel next door where they were staying. As they parted ways to their respective rooms, their anticipation hung heavy in the air. But as the night deepened, George, who had been captivated by Tsuyu, found himself alone with her in his room. The allure of her beauty was a siren's call, and he couldn't resist it. As he began undressing himself, Tsuyu climbed on top of him and slowly revealed herself. George, who had closed his eyes, was enjoying every sensation until he got a glimpse of her true form. The man's eyes, filled with terror, met hers. He opened his mouth to let out a blood-curdling scream. Then her skeletal hand pressed against his trembling mouth, silencing him. Her fingers bore the essence of death, a death that would soon become intimately acquainted with his very soul, and then with a malevolence that transcended the mortal realm. She sealed their dreadful connection with a kiss. It was not the kiss of lovers, but the kiss of an entity that feasted upon life itself. As their lips met, a chilling darkness seemed to emanate from her, enveloping the man in a deadly embrace. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever known. It was a kiss that sapped not just the warmth from his body, but the very essence of his being. His eyes widened with unimaginable agony, and he convulsed in an attempt to escape. The room seemed to close in around them, the air heavy with the weight of impending doom. The man's once vibrant complexion drained of color, leaving behind a lifeless husk. His screams, at first filled with terror, were gradually silenced as the last of his vitality were cruelly drained away. In those moments, the man's existence was extinguished. His once animated body now lay limp, a mere vessel drained of its life force. Suyu, her lips still tainted with the essence of stolen life, withdrew from the lifeless form before her. The scream had reverberated through the hotel. The friends rushed to the source of the sound, their hearts pounding with dread. Before them stood Suyu, or what had once been Suyu, now transformed into the ghastly figure. Her skeletal form sent shivers of dread down their spines, and the realization of their impending doom washed over them like a tidal wave. Beside her lay the lifeless body of their friend, drained of all vitality, a mere shell of his former self. The truth was clear now. They were in the presence of a malevolent force beyond their comprehension. She was the Hone'ona. Centuries ago, Tsuyu, once a mortal woman, had been married to a man who had betrayed her in the cruelest way imaginable. Unable to bear children, Tsuyu's husband had sold her into a wretched life in a brothel. A decision that would seal her fate. In her darkest hour, Tsuyu had found solace in the friendship of another woman named Kion, and together they had hatched a plan to escape their miserable existence. But Tsuyu was once again betrayed. Kion, driven by her own desires and ambitions, slept with her husband. She revealed their escape plans to the very man who had sold her into this life. That night, as Tsuyu slept, her husband had snuffed out her life, his hands stained with her blood. Her lifeless body had been cast into the very river that now flowed silently beside the hotel, becoming one with the souls of other unfortunate women who had met a similar fate. In that watery grave, their spirits had merged, giving birth to the vengeful yokai known as Hone'ona. Fueled by centuries of torment and anger, Hone'ona had dedicated herself to exacting vengeance upon the men who wronged her and for women who had met a similar fate as hers. Her methods of retribution were as varied as they were horrifying, each tailored to reflect the depth of her anger and the darkness of her past. As the men quivered with fear, the women who had accompanied them stepped forward, their eyes devoid of emotion. With unnatural strength, the women held the lifeless bodies down, their eyes glazed over with a sinister resolve. One by one, Hone'ona exacted her horrifying retribution upon the men, their deaths agonizing and gruesome, their pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. For Alex, she embraced him with a bone-crushing hug, her bony fingers tightening around his body, crushing bones and organs until his life was extinguished. His body contorted in agony as his very essence was drained away. Then she turned her attention to Matt, her grip on his head unyielding. She squeezed until the world around him faded into a suffocating darkness, stealing away his sight, then his hearing, and finally, his ability to breathe. He was left to suffocate in a nightmarish void of his own making. As the men's lifeless bodies lay on the bed, the women who had accompanied them stepped forward once more, their faces still devoid of emotion. They had been complicit in this ritual, and they now bore the grim responsibility of disposing their remains. With a grim determination, they carried the lifeless bodies to the river, where the souls of the unfortunate women who had met a similar fate as Tsuyu awaited them. There, beneath the moonless sky, they joined the legacy of the yokai known as Hone'ona, their actions forever bound to the darkness that had consumed them all. In a quiet rural village in Beijing was a place where ancient folklore and reality blurred, particularly as Chinese New Year neared. Red lanterns danced in the winter breeze, their glow competing with the distant pops of firecrackers and the aroma of incense. Li, a young schoolteacher, had recently arrived. Her eyes filled with the wonder of the village's mysterious aura, so different from the bustling city she'd left. As the villagers prepared for the new year, Li began to sense an unspoken tension, a caution in their laughter and hushed conversations. Her neighbor, Old Chen, a man whose face bore the marks of time and wisdom, often watched her very closely. One morning, he offered her a cryptic message. "The shadow fears the light of 1,000 truths. What is hidden in plain sight holds the key, but only the seeker who listens to silence will find it." Li pondered his words, their meaning deep. She smiled and waved goodbye. At the new school, everything went well for Li. The children, especially Wei, a bright and sweet boy, brought joy to her days with his small morning gifts. A hand-drawn picture, a ripe apple. However, as the new year drew closer, Li began to feel an overwhelming fatigue that clouded her mind and weakened her body. It was as if a heavy blanket had been thrown over her very spirit. The nights, however, were the worst. As soon as Li closed her eyes, she would find herself plunged into a realm of shadows and haunting dreams that left her tossing and turning. Morning would bring no relief. Each day, Li awoke feeling more depleted than before. Her energy sapped, her vitality drained. Even Wei began to notice the change in his beloved teacher. His face was full of concern as he handed her the morning's gift, his usual bright chatter replaced by hesitant words and worried glances. The villagers watched her with a mix of worry and an unspoken recognition, as if they knew the cause of her affliction. The festive air of the New Year celebrations now seemed to mock her inner turmoil. The shadows in her dreams became more menacing, the whispers more insistent, hinting at an unseen force seeking to claim her. Amidst this growing unease, it was Old Chen who finally stepped forth. One evening, he beckoned Li to join him near the path that led into the dense forest. Old Chen shared the legend that had been whispered in hushed tones for centuries. The Jiangxi is a cursed entity born from improper burial and dark sorcery. Clad in the robes of a Qing dynasty official, it is trapped between life and death. He spoke of how the Jiangxi, driven by an insatiable hunger for qi, the vital life force, preyed upon the living under the cover of night. Old Chen continued. The Jiangxi was once a corrupt official, punished by celestial forces, condemned to roam eternally, bound to the shadows. Li listened, a chill coursing through her despite the mild evening air. The pieces of her own experience began to align with a terrifying clarity. The unexplainable fatigue, the nightmarish visions, the villagers' guarded glances. Many years ago, the Jiangxi brought calamity upon this village. It was sealed in the old temple deep in the forest, a place now shunned and feared. But some bonds, even those forged by ancient rites, can weaken with time. Feeling a profound sense of foreboding, Li returned home, too drained and paranoid to join the New Year celebrations. The lively sounds of the celebration, music, laughter, the crackle of fireworks, drifted through her window as she lay down. A restless sleep overtook her. Completely out of it, she began to sleepwalk, drawn towards the village square where the festivities were in full swing. Guided by an unseen force, she walked through the quiet streets, moving away from the safety of her home towards the heart of the festivities. The village square was alive with vibrant colors and lights. Lanterns swayed gently in the night breeze, casting a warm glow over the faces of the villagers as they celebrated. Dragon dancers weaved through the crowd, their movements both graceful and powerful. But amidst this scene of joy, villagers noticed Lee. Her eyes vacant, her steps slow and unsteady, as she moved through the crowd like a ghost. It was then, at the peak of the celebration, that a sudden eerie hush fell over the village square. The music faltered, the laughter died down, and the crowd parted in a mix of confusion and fear. From the shadows at the edge of the square, a figure emerged, the Jiangshi. It emerged from the shadows. Its skin was ghastly pale, almost translucent, stretched over its skeletal frame. Its eyes sunken and devoid of life, glowed with a malevolent red light that seemed to pierce the soul. It was clad in the rotting remnants of a Qing dynasty official's robe. Its movements were grotesque and unnatural. Each step was accompanied by the sickening crack of stiff, unyielding joints, echoing eerily through the silent village square. As the villagers, led by old Chen, ran over and formed a protective circle around Li, the Jiangshi fixated on them with a predatory gaze. It let out a guttural growl, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the underworld, chilling the blood of all who heard it. Finally, Li woke up from her trance. With a sudden jerky motion, the Jiangshi lunged at the nearest villager, its movement swift and horrifying. The villager, paralyzed by fear, could only scream as the creature's cold, dead hands closed around his throat. The Jiangshi's touch was like ice, draining the life force from its victim in a matter of seconds. The villager's skin turned ashen, his eyes wide with terror before he slumped to the ground, lifeless. Amidst this tense standoff, a small figure pushed through the crowd. It was Wei, clutching something tightly in his hand as he made his way towards Li. In his eyes was a mix of fear and courage. Reaching Li, Wei extended his hand, revealing a special talisman written in chicken's blood. "Teacher Li, my grandmother said this has been in our family for generations. It's supposed to protect against evil spirits." Li, taken aback by Wei's bravery, took the gift. It was cool to the touch, and as her fingers closed around it, a strange sensation coursed through her. The Jiangshi turned its malevolent gaze upon them. It moved with a ghastly swiftness, its body seeming to glide over the ground, unhindered by the laws of the living. The red glow in its eyes intensified, casting a sinister light on its decaying face. The talisman began to glow, its light a stark contrast to the darkness that emanated from the Jiangshi. The creature hissed, a sound that was both a wail of anger and a cry of pain as the light from the talisman seared it like fire. The Jiangshi recoiled but did not retreat, its desire to consume life force overcoming its aversion to the light. Old Chen, seizing the moment, led the villagers in a final desperate chant. The combined forces created an invisible barrier, a shield of light and ancient magic that the Jiangshi could not penetrate. The creature let out a series of horrifying shrieks, its body contorting in agony as the light burned its flesh. Its movements became erratic, a dance of pain and rage, before it finally turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing into the night from which it had come. The villagers stood in a stunned silence, the echoes of the Jiangshi screams still ringing in their ears. They had faced an unspeakable horror and had emerged victorious, but the night had left its mark on their souls. Li, holding the still glowing talisman, felt a mix of relief and sorrow. She looked down at Wei, his face pale but his eyes still brave. "You saved us, Wei. You saved us all," she whispered. As the villagers slowly came to terms with what had happened, they resumed their celebrations, but the joy was now tempered with a sense of solemnity. Li, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and belonging, joined in the celebrations. She knew that her life would never be the same. She had faced the shadows of the past and found a light that would guide her in the days to come. Scotland's relentless cold, rain, and greyness had done little to impress Owen so far. It felt unfair that 400 years ago, his ancestors had chosen to depart for the New World. And now he found himself stuck in this foreign land, attempting to enjoy a cigarette outside the only pub in town. His girlfriend, Mariana, had convinced him to return to his homeland in the name of exploring his roots. Personally, he considered it a missed opportunity for a perfectly good vacation. Mariana, however, appeared to be having the time of her life. She had an insatiable fascination with conspiracy theories, and Owen suspected that the allure of his family's Loch Ness connection played a more significant role in this trip than any half-hearted pursuit of self-discovery. There she was, as cheerful as ever, having a conversation with a man who had clearly indulged in several pints.
There's just no other explanation for it.
He drawled in a thick local accent.
Nessie must be back. What else could make that many people disappear around the loch?
How many people are missing? Mariana's eyes widened with fear, yet beneath the surface, Owen detected a hint of morbid fascination. His thoughts drifted while they continued to talk about the recent missing persons cases, until he was jolted back into the present by Mariana's hand tugging at his sleeve. Owen, we have to go. 4 people have gone missing this month, all around the loch. This could really be something. She continued without waiting for his answer. I have to see it. Let's go right now. Rory says he'll take us. Rory, a homeless man they had met earlier, extended an invitation with a turn of his head. Owen, reluctant but intrigued, found himself with no compelling reason to decline. The rain eased into a gentle drizzle as Rory led the way. Mariana continued to bombard their guide with questions, while Owen remained silent. Approaching the water's edge, the loch's eerie stillness draped their surroundings in an unsettling, foreboding aura. Their guide, seemingly unfazed, continued to lead them deeper into the heart of the uncertainty. The trio moved with cautious determination, every step echoing with an unspoken sense of foreboding. Amidst the unsettling silence, Owen grappled with the thought of whether it had been sufficient time to propose they head back when he was interrupted by a sound. It was like a whine. It was a strange sound, long and low and mournful. Owen desperately tried to convince himself that it was merely the wind rustling through the trees. Rory froze. What is it? Mariana hissed in a harsh whisper. Rory looked at her. Until now, he had been relaxed, but now he seemed genuinely petrified. If this was all some kind of hoax, then the man deserved an Oscar for his performance. Maybe it's time to head back, Owen said. Someone had to be the voice of reason. Mariana grabbed his arm though, tugging at him and looking up at him with a disappointed expression. We can't leave now. Not when we finally heard something, she whined. Come on, just a few more minutes. Owen rolled his eyes, but he gave in to her request like he always did. Their companion remained silent, focused on the mournful wail's haunting melody. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings with intense concentration. Only a few seconds passed between the thought that maybe they really were in danger and the beast moving into their line of sight. It was impossibly fast, just a dark shape cutting through the water like a speedboat, powering forward to where they stood. Mariana's hand gripped Owen's arm on instinct, and he wrapped his frozen fingers around her elbow in response. Rory stood between them and the water's edge, and everyone seemed to be collectively holding their breath. When the monster struck, it was sudden. A long, curved neck stretched out of the water, ending with a face that looked like something out of Jurassic Park. It was still too dark to make out the details, but Owen could see the thing's eyes without any effort. They were dark and fierce, glistening in the moonlight as they locked in on its prey. That was all the warning they got, and none of them were quick enough to turn and run. The head came down like a whip, stretching its jaw open wide and latching onto Rory by the throat. A multitude of sharp, serrated teeth sank mercilessly into his flesh, ripping it apart and causing his blood to cascade down. He didn't even have time to scream. The monstrous creature surged upward, hoisting Rory's lifeless body high into the air. It gave him a hard shake, like a dog might do, and the couple could hear the unmistakable snap of his bones giving way. "Mariana, run!" Owen shouted as soon as his fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. Gripping her arm tightly, he yanked her forward, her mouth still agape with shock. And together, they tore through the dense underbrush, driven by sheer panic. Branches lashed against their faces, but their determination to flee drove them onward in the general direction of the road. By the time they were able to flag down a passing car, Mariana was hysterical. There was blood caked into her hair from several small cuts, and she couldn't seem to pull more than a few words together in order, just muttering words like monster and real. When they told their story to people in town, everyone rolled their eyes at the tale of some drunk American tourists who let themselves get carried away by their imaginations. Owen and Mariana were left scarred. Days after their terrifying encounter, Owen began to experience haunting dreams. In his sleep, something from the highlands called out to him, beckoning him towards the loch. Unable to resist the relentless pull, Owen and Mariana returned to Loch Ness later that week. They ventured back to the small highland village, hoping to find more information about the creature. Deep in the archives of a small library, they stumbled upon a weathered journal that belonged to one of Owen's ancestors from centuries ago. As they leafed through the pages, they discovered entries detailing encounters with the Loch Ness monster. The journal described gruesome rituals performed by Owen's ancestors, dark sacrifices to appease the ancient terror that lurked in the depths of the loch. Dread filled Owen's heart as he realized the truth. The creature was not a mere legend, but a malevolent guardian of the Highland secrets. Following the instructions from the journal, Owen and Mariana embarked on an expedition back to Loch Ness. Armed with their newfound knowledge and a growing sense of dread, they arrived at the loch's shore, determined to confront the creature and destroy it. The rituals described in the journal were gruesome. They involved chanting ancient guttural incantations that resonated with the very darkness of the loch. The night was filled with howling winds and rain, as if nature itself was protesting their presence. As they chanted, a deep, low growl echoed from the water. Suddenly, the Loch Ness monster emerged. It was different this time, more aggressive and relentless than ever before. The creature's enormous head, with eyes gleaming with malevolence, bore down on them. Terrified and unable to complete the rituals in time, Owen and Mariana watched in horror as the Loch Ness monster's gaping mouth stretched wide, exposing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The creature was filled with a vengeful fury as its eyes examined Owen and Mariana. Then, in a heart-wrenching final act of desperation, Owen forcibly pushed Mariana towards the oncoming creature. The monster's jaws snapped shut with incredible force, tearing her apart in a gruesome display of carnage. Her screams were silenced as she was devoured, her blood staining the dark waters. Owen, with a grim smile, could only watch as the Loch Ness monster returned to the depths, leaving him completely alone. Owen's sacrificial act, like those of his ancestors before him, was the price paid to appease the ancient terror that lurked in Loch Ness. His family had not only feared the Loch Ness monster, but had also worshipped it for centuries, offering its sacrifices to protect themselves and their land. And this time, centuries later, it was dear Mariana. Owen was left forever bound to the horrifying legend of the loch. Hiroki gasped for air as he struggled against the icy grip of the water. his arms flailing desperately to keep him afloat. The river, once a serene sanctuary, had become a battleground, threatening to pull him under with every passing second. His mind raced with confusion and fear. How had he ended up here, on the brink of drowning in the very waters he had played in since he was an infant? The village of Mizohashi had always been a tranquil place, nestled between the rolling hills and the meandering river that provided for its people. But in recent months, an unsettling change had swept over the community. Fishermen, the heart of the village's livelihood, began to vanish without a trace. Their boats found empty and adrift in the river's calm waters. With each disappearance, a ripple of fear spread among the villagers. The river, once full of fish, seemed to have fallen under a mysterious curse. The catches grew smaller, and soon a food shortage began to loom over the village. In hushed conversations, the adults spoke of the old legends, tales of a creature that dwelled in the river's depths. They whispered of its cunning nature, wondering if the creature from their childhood stories could be more than just a myth. As the situation grew more dire, a sense of desperation settled over the village. The elders called for caution, advising everyone to stay away from the river. But for Hiroki, a young boy with a curious spirit, the warnings only fueled his fascination. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Without the adults knowing, Hiroki found himself drawn to the river's edge, determined to uncover the truth behind the disappearances. One summer evening, as the sun's golden rays retreated behind the mountains, Hiroki found himself wandering along the riverbank. As he roamed further from the village, he stumbled upon a peculiar sight. A series of odd webbed footprints on the soft mud near the water's edge. Perhaps it was a frog's possible dinner for his family. Intrigued by his discovery, Hiroki felt a surge of excitement. The footprints led away from the river into the dense thicket of the forest. Driven by curiosity, he decided to follow them. The further Hiroki ventured into the forest, the more the light dimmed. A sense of unease began to creep over him, but his determination pushed him forward. Suddenly, a strange gurgling sound echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down Hiroki's spine. It was unlike anything he had ever heard. He paused, listening intently, trying to discern the direction of the sound. It seemed to be coming from a clearing just ahead. As Hiroki ventured deeper into the forest, he stumbled upon a clearing that sent a chill down his spine. There, scattered among the trees, were the remains of the missing fishermen, their bodies half-eaten and left to rot. To Hiroki's horror, he noticed that their organs were gruesomely extracted. He remembered that a creature known as a kappa was known for its appetite for the shirikodama. The sight was horrifying, and Hiroki felt a surge of anger and sadness. He knew he had to act, but as soon as he turned to leave the clearing, a strange sound stopped him in his tracks. There, in the dim light filtering through the leaves, he saw it. A creature straight out of the legends he had dismissed. It was the kappa. It was small, no taller than a child, with green scaly skin and a shell resembling that of a turtle. Its most striking feature was the water-filled dish-like depression atop its head, shimmering in the fading light. But instead of the menacing presence Hiroki expected, the creature seemed almost comical, as it let out a series of loud, embarrassing sounds. The kappa passed gas, each time with a mischievous giggle. It was a bizarre sight, one that momentarily lightened the heavy atmosphere. The creature's eyes, glowing with an eerie luminescence, were fixed on Hiroki, who stood frozen in place. The kappa, noticing Hiroki's hesitation, let out a series of mocking gurgles. As if amused by his fear, it began to dance around him in a circle, its movements graceful yet unnerving. Hiroki realized that the kappa was toying with him. using its cunning nature to intimidate and confuse him. Determined not to fall for its tricks, Hiroki tried to keep his focus. But as he reached a clearing, the ground suddenly gave way beneath him, and he found himself sliding down a steep embankment toward the river. The Kappa followed, its sinister grin widening as it watched Hiroki struggle to regain his footing. With a powerful leap, the Kappa descended upon Hiroki, its claws extended and its eyes burning with malice. Hiroki barely managed to roll out of the way, feeling the rush of air as the creature's claws swiped at the space where he had just been. The Kappa's laughter echoed through the air, a clear sign of its enjoyment in the chase. Hiroki's heart raced as he stood at the water's edge. He had nowhere to go. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped his ankle, pulling him with terrifying force into the water. He gasped, water filling his lungs as he was dragged deeper into the river's embrace. Panic set in as he struggled, his arms flailing in an attempt to break free. Just when he thought he could hold his breath no longer, he felt himself being pulled even deeper, down to where the light couldn't reach. In the murky darkness, he came face to face with the Kappa, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. It stared at him with curiosity, as if studying its prey. Hiroki could feel the cold, calculating gaze of the Kappa, sizing him up for its next move. Suddenly, the creature lunged forward, its webbed hands reaching out to grasp Hiroki. Hiroki dodged to the side, avoiding the Kappa's attack. He knew he couldn't outrun the creature in its element, but he also knew he couldn't let himself be paralyzed by fear. With a surge of adrenaline, he fought back, throwing punches and kicks in a desperate attempt to fend off the Kappa. The creature was quick, countering Hiroki's moves with swift, precise strikes of its own. It was clear that the Kappa was not only strong, but also skilled in martial arts. Its movements, fluid and deadly, but in a burst of desperation, Hiroki reached out and managed to grab a hold of the Kappa's Sara, the water-filled dish on its head and the source of its power. He could feel the creature's strength decreasing as he tipped the Sara, spilling some of its contents. The Kappa let out a ghastly screech. Seizing the moment, Hiroki broke free from the creature's grasp and kicked towards the surface with all his might. He emerged, gasping for air. It felt like a sweet embrace after the suffocating depths of the water. Exhausted and trembling, Hiroki dragged himself onto the riverbank, collapsing onto the damp earth. But his respite was short-lived. The water's surface rippled ominously, and the Kappa re-emerged, its eyes burning with an intensified fury. Scrambling to his feet, Hiroki searched desperately for a weapon, anything he could use to defend himself. His hand brushed against a sharp, jagged rock, and he grasped it tightly, turning to face the advancing Kappa. The creature attacked again. This time, Hiroki was ready. He thrust the rock forward with all his might, catching the Kappa off guard and striking it in the chest. The Kappa let out a howl of pain, its grip faltering. Seizing the opportunity, Hiroki pushed the Kappa back with all his strength, sending it tumbling into the shallow waters of the river, and the Kappa struggled. The creature thrashed wildly, but Hiroki didn't relent. He knew this was his only chance to escape. With one final desperate effort, Hiroki delivered a powerful kick to the Kappa, knocking the rest of the water from its Sara. The Kappa's eyes dimmed as it lay defeated in the water. Panting heavily, Hiroki staggered back, his heart racing with a mix of fear and triumph. He had faced the dreaded Kappa and survived, but as he looked down at the defeated creature, a chill ran down his spine. The legends were real, and he knew that the world was filled with terrors beyond his wildest imagination. Hiroki vowed to never underestimate the stories of the old again. As Emily took one last bite of her birthday cake, she glanced at the clock and realized how late it was. A wave of panic washed over her as she remembered that her mother was going to be in town early in the morning. She quickly stood up, thanking her friends for the wonderful birthday surprise they had thrown for her. She called out for Max, her loyal companion, who had been patiently waiting for her. Her friends, concerned for her safety, suggested she stay the night. However, Emily knew that if she stayed, she'd likely oversleep and miss her mother's arrival. All right. But remember, if you hear something, no, you didn't. Her friends remarked as they said their goodbyes. Those were the exact words she heard all her life growing up in the Appalachian Mountains. The party's warmth and laughter faded into the background as Emily and Max set off through the dense forest. A sense of unease began to creep over Emily as the forest seemed more alive. Max, too, seemed on edge. His ears perked up, and his pace quickened. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the moonlight ahead. A woman standing in the path. "Emily, is that you?" "It's so cold out here," the woman called out, sounding eerily like her mother. Max growled. As Emily drew closer, she realized with horror that something was terribly wrong. The figure's eyes were too bright, too unnatural, and there was an unsettling stiffness in her movements. A sense of dread washed over Emily as she remembered the old tales of skinwalkers, beings that could mimic the voices and appearances of loved ones to lure their victims. As Emily and Max sprinted toward the cabin, the skinwalker's voice grew louder and more distorted, a chilling blend of her mother's voice and a sinister, otherworldly tone. Max started barking. Emily glanced back and saw a horrifying sight. The figure of her mother, now clearly not human, with glowing eyes and a twisted, snarling expression. The skinwalker moved towards them with a speed that seemed impossible for a human. Max barked again and leaped toward the creature, ready to defend Emily at all costs and let her go ahead of him. The skinwalker, however, seemed prepared for this, quickly dodging Max's attack with a swift, fluid motion. As Emily reached the cabin, she could hear the sounds of Max's growls and the skinwalker's eerie, mocking laughter behind her. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking with fear, and finally managed to unlock the door. With one last desperate look back, she saw Max holding his ground, facing off against the skinwalker. Emily rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and quickly formed a protective line of salt at the threshold. Emily whispered a prayer for her loyal companion, hoping that the protective measures would be enough. She rushed to secure every window and entrance, her hands trembling with each lock she fastened. Outside, the howls of the skinwalker grew more desperate. Max's barks were relentless. Emily peered through a crack in the curtains, her breath catching in her throat at the sight before her. The skinwalker, in its grotesque imitation of her mother, paced back and forth, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. It seemed to be searching for a way in, its form shifting and twitching unnaturally. Suddenly, it stopped and locked eyes with Emily, its gaze piercing through the darkness. "Emily, my dear, why won't you let me in? It's so cold out here," the skinwalker pleaded in a voice that eerily resembled her mother's. "I've come all this way for your birthday, and you leave me out in the dark?" The creature then turned its attention back to Max, who stood his ground bravely. In a swift motion, the skinwalker lunged at Max, causing Emily's heart to skip a beat. But Max, with his quick reflexes, dodged the attack and made a break for the cabin door. Emily quickly opened it just enough for him to slip through before slamming it shut again. With Max safely inside, the skinwalker's voice grew more insistent. "Emily, sweetheart, please open the door. I want to make sure you're safe." But Emily knew better than to fall for the skinwalker's deceitful words. The skinwalker, now furious at being rejected, began to throw itself against the door with terrifying force. As the hours dragged on, the Skinwalker's attacks became more frenzied, its howls echoing through the forest like the cries of a tormented soul. Emily just hugged Max tight and listened to music. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break through the darkness, the howls outside started to fade. The Skinwalker, defeated by the coming daylight, let out one final enraged cry before retreating into the depths of the forest. Emily collapsed to the floor, exhaustion and relief washing over her as she hugged Max. Shortly after the terrifying encounter, Emily called her mother, only to learn that her flight had been delayed. Throughout the day, Emily and Max stayed close, each providing comfort to the other as they tried to shake off the remnants of fear. And as night fell, Emily turned on every lamp in the cabin. She double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, the salt line still intact from the night before. The hours ticked by, and Emily's anxiety grew with each passing minute. Finally, a knock came at the door. Emily's heart leaped into her throat. Peering through the window, she saw her mother standing on the porch, her luggage in hand. Rushing to the door, Emily threw it open and embraced her, tears of relief streaming down her face. But as she pulled away, Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was a flicker of something in her mother's eyes that didn't quite belong there. "Are you okay, honey?" the figure said in her mother's voice, but something was off. A cold realization washed over Emily. She hadn't hugged her mother. She had embraced the Skinwalker. Panic surged through her as she pushed the creature away and slammed the door shut. She fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Outside, the Skinwalker let out a loud, chilling laugh. "Won't you let me in to celebrate your birthday?" Emily backed away from the door. Suddenly, she heard another knock, softer this time, coming from the back door. Peering through the window, she saw her mother standing there, confusion and fear on her face as Emily just stared. "Emily, what's going on? Why won't you let me in?" her mother asked. The Skinwalker, sensing its opportunity, began to mimic her mother's pleas. Emily's mind raced as she tried to distinguish between the two voices. In a moment of clarity, she remembered a secret her grandmother had once shared. A special knock, a family code that only they knew. Pressing her face close to the door, she called out, "Mom, do the knock, do the knock!" After a tense moment, she heard it, the familiar rhythm of the secret knock. Relief flooded through her as she quickly opened the door and pulled her mother inside, locking the door behind them. Together they watched as the Skinwalker shifted and changed in the moonlight. Emily and her mother held each other close, as Max growled softly. In a desperate bid for safety, Emily's mother remembered an old family legend about a talisman hidden in the cabin, said to possess the power to repel evil. With no time to lose, Emily and her mother searched frantically, rummaging through the old boxes. Finally, in a dusty old chest, Emily's fingers closed around a small, intricately carved amulet. As soon as she touched it, a warm, pulsing energy coursed through her body. Outside, the Skinwalker sensed the presence of the talisman, and its howls grew even more frenzied. Emily approached the door, holding the amulet out in front of her. With a deep breath, she flung the door open. The Skinwalker recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. Emily stepped forward, the amulet glowing brightly in her hand, casting a protective light around her and her home. "Leave this place and never return," she commanded, her voice steady and filled with an authority she didn't know she possessed. The Skinwalker let out one final ear-splitting howl before disappearing into the forest. Emily and her mother embraced as dawn broke. Emily turned to her mother smiling. She was grateful for the gift of another day. She knew that no matter what shadows lurked in the corners of the world, she had the strength to face them as long as she had her mother by her side. In the bustling heart of Tokyo, where the vibrant art scene thrived, two struggling art students faced an unnerving lull in their careers. Akio, the photographer, and Mio, the makeup artist, had not received any gigs for a while. But one evening, as they discussed their dwindling opportunities in a cramped, dimly lit coffee shop, Akio received an intriguing email. A potential client sought his services for a private photo shoot. She offered a generous sum, enough to cover their expenses for the month. Eager for any opportunity, they agreed to meet her at an old studio in the outskirts of the city. The studio, an expansive space that had seen better days, echoed with their footsteps as they entered. Waiting in the dimly lit confines was their client, a tall figure draped in a sleek dark coat. Her face was obscured by a mask. "Thank you for coming," she greeted them. As they began setting up, Akio glanced at her curiously. "We're here to make you look your best. Whenever you're ready, you can remove the mask." She hesitated. "For now, I'd prefer to keep it on." The shoot started with the woman posing elegantly, yet always with her face hidden. Akio and Mio exchanged puzzled looks, but focused on capturing her mysterious allure. As they adjusted the lights and angles, the woman's aura of sadness and grace became increasingly palpable. Mio, unable to contain her curiosity, finally broke the silence. "May I ask why you choose to keep covered? It's quite unusual for a photo shoot." The woman paused, her eyes meeting Mio's in the mirror. She didn't respond. As the night wore on, a tension built within the room. Finally, during a brief pause, the woman turned to them, her hands trembling slightly as they reached for her mask. "You have been very kind. Perhaps it's time. Tell me, do you think I'm pretty?" The question hung heavy in the air, driven by a mixture of professionalism and genuine concern. Akio responded warmly. "Yes, of course." Mio murmured her agreement, cautious but encouraging. With a slow, almost ceremonial motion, the woman removed her mask, revealing her face. The sight was shocking. Her mouth was grotesquely slit from ear to ear. Mio gasped, stepping back instinctively, shaking her head. The woman's eyes filled with a profound sadness, then flickered with a darker emotion. Swiftly, she moved towards Mio, her demeanor shifting frighteningly. There was a flash of silver, a scream, and then silence fell like a cloak. Mio laid on the ground, clutching her face as blood gushed out of her. No makeup can fix that," the woman whispered cruelly. She then turned to Akio. "And you? Do you still find me pretty?" Akio, his mind racing with terror and pity, nodded slowly. "I think you need help. Let me help you." But with a shake of her head and a mournful smile, she stepped back into the shadows, her figure blending into the darkness of the studio. "It's too late," she murmured. In the aftermath, as emergency services filled the once quiet studio, Akio wrestled with the evening's surreal horrors. As he shared the events with the authorities, his thoughts lingered on the pain and tragedy behind the mask. One of the cops was familiar with the woman and explained. Kuchisake Onna, which translates to slit-mouthed woman, is a well-known figure in Japanese folklore. According to the legend, she is a malicious spirit or ghost of a woman who was mutilated and her mouth was slit from ear to ear. She wears a mask to cover her disfigured face. Kuchisake Onna approaches her victims and asks them a chilling question. "Am I pretty?" If the person answers no, she kills them with a pair of scissors she carries. If the answer is yes, she removes her mask to reveal her horrifying mutilation, then asks again. If the person reacts with fright or changes their answer, she kills them. If they don't, she might cut their mouths to resemble hers. After the horrific incident at the studio, Akio couldn't escape the dark allure of Kuchisake Onna. Her presence escalated into a terror that stalked him relentlessly. He would see her reflection fleeting across windows and mirrors, her horrific smile briefly catching the light before vanishing. Each encounter left him chilled to the bone. Her whispered question, "Do you still think I'm pretty?" echoing in his ears long after she disappeared. His apartment, once a sanctuary, became a prison of paranoia. At night, he could hear the soft, dragging steps of someone pacing back and forth outside his door. Some nights, the handle would turn slowly, quietly, testing whether it was locked. But Akio felt an inexplicable pull to understand her, to delve deeper into the legend that now consumed his life. He immersed himself in folklore, discovering tales of Kuchisake Onna's origins. a woman mutilated and cast aside, her spirit twisted by betrayal and sorrow. As his empathy for her grew, so did his fear. One stormy night, as Akio developed photos in his dark room, the door creaked open and there she stood, her figure obscured by the darkness, only her slit mouth visible, grinning grotesquely. "Do you still think I'm pretty?" she asked, her voice a deathly whisper that sent shivers down his spine. Frozen with fear, Akio couldn't respond. She stepped closer, the stench of decay filling the room. "Answer me," she hissed, her face inches from his. "Yes," Akio stammered, his voice barely audible. "Yes, you are." She looked at him with cruel satisfaction, and suddenly she vanished. That night, Akio couldn't sleep. He sat awake, clutching a camera, his only defense against the unknown. The next few days, the hauntings grew more intense, each encounter more terrifying than the last. She began to appear not just in solitudes, but in public places, always watching, always waiting. Driven to the brink, Akio decided to confront her, to end this torment. He set up his camera in the very studio where they first met, the place where the veil between their worlds had thinned. As the clock struck midnight, she appeared, her presence filling the room with cold dread. "Why me?" Akio demanded, his voice echoing the empty studio. "Because you saw the real me, and you didn't turn away," Kuchisake Onna replied. Akio raised his camera, his hands trembling. "Let me capture you again." She paused, considering his offer. Slowly she nodded, and as he snapped photos, her figure began to fade, her outline blurring with each flash until she disappeared entirely. Akio left the studio that night, his heart heavy. He had captured her essence, perhaps freeing her spirit, or at least calming it. In the months following his terrifying encounters with Kuchisake Onna, Akio poured his fear and fascination into his photography, capturing the haunting essence of the spectral figure who tormented him. He decided to host a private gallery showing, titled The Haunted Lens, inviting art critics, paranormal researchers, and enthusiasts of the supernatural. The gallery was filled with stark, chilling photographs of Kuchisake Onna, each one more gripping than the last, showing her figure and gruesomely slit mouth. Whispers of awe and horror mingled in the dimly lit room. The atmosphere was tense. Midway through the evening, the temperature dropped sharply, and a heavy silence fell over the crowd. Kuchisake Onna materialized before her images, her presence causing a stir of fear and fascination. Her eyes darted across the room, taking in the crowd and the photographs of herself. Seeing herself through the eyes of others, her anger ignited. A deep, unsettling scream escaped her, chilling the room further. She moved swiftly, her form almost a blur as she approached a young woman who had been admiring the grotesque beauty of the images. The crowd froze, watching in horror as Kuchisake Onna pulled out her scissors. "Am I pretty?" she hissed, her voice a terrifying whisper that echoed through the gallery. The woman, caught in a paralyzing fear, couldn't respond. Before Kuchisake Onna could strike, Akio intervened. He stepped between them, his heart pounding but his voice surprisingly calm. "She means yes, you are beautiful," he quickly said, addressing Kuchisake Onna while keeping his eyes on her menacing gaze. "Everyone here understands you more than you know." Kuchisake Onna paused, her hands still raised, her expression one of confusion and anger. Akio continued, "Your story, your pain, it deserves to be seen and not feared." Slowly, the tension in her posture lessened. Her hand lowered, and the supernatural chill began to dissipate. The room exhaled in relief as Kuchisake Onna turned her gaze back to the photographs, then to the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces of those who now looked back at her, not just with fear, but with understanding. Kuchisake Onna looked at Akio, a nod of acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude, before she faded away, her form dissolving into the air like mist. The aftermath of that night was profound. Akio's exhibit was talked about for weeks, for being a sensational display of supernatural art, and as an encounter that bridged the gap between the living and the dead. His career took off spectacularly, with galleries eager to host his work. Akio continued his work, forever changed by the ghostly muse who had both haunted his dreams and made them come true.